twos. I used to work overnight security at a commercial storage facility. You know, the kind of place where people rent these long hallways of units to store old furniture, business equipment, or just stuff they don't have room for anymore. The building itself was massive, and after 9 p.m., it was supposed to be completely empty. Nobody was allowed in except registered tenants, and even they needed special key codes to get past the front gate. My job wasn't exactly glamorous. I walked the hallways every hour, checked the cameras, and made sure nobody had fallen asleep inside their unit. Which, believe it or not, happened more often than you'd think. On one particular winter night, something happened that still follows me to this day. Something I can't explain. It was around 2:30 a.m. when I first started hearing it. A faint tapping sound. It wasn't loud, more like a soft knock knock knock, echoing down one of the middle corridors. At first, I brushed it off. I figured it was just the pipes settling because the temperature had dropped outside. That kind of thing happens all the time in an old building like that. But then I heard it again. 3 distinct taps. A pause, then 3 more. A little annoyed, I pulled up the camera feed for that hallway. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. No one walking. No shadows. No movement whatsoever. The corridor was completely still. Still, I grabbed my heavy-duty flashlight and decided to go down there anyway. You can't be too careful in a place like this. When you walk through those storage hallways at night, everything sounds bigger. Your own breathing seems to bounce right back at you. Your footsteps echo like they belong to someone else, following just behind. The air is cold and carries every little sound. I kept walking, my light cutting through the darkness, following the tapping until I realized it was coming from Unit 316. I immediately checked my logs on my phone. No one was supposed to be there. There were no late-night access requests on file, and the gate system showed no active entries for hours. My heart started to beat a little faster. Standing in front of the cold metal door, I knocked once, my knuckles making a sharp sound in the silence. "Security," I called out. "Is anyone inside?" No answer. For a moment, there was just dead silence, but then the tapping started again, and only this time, it came from the asterisk inside asterisk of the unit door. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate. They weren't impatient taps. They were too methodical for that. They weren't accidental either. They felt intentional. I took a step back from the door and called my supervisor on the radio. I tried to keep my voice steady, explaining the situation. She told me to shine my flashlight under the door to see if I could see anyone's feet. It's a standard procedure to check if someone's hiding or passed out. So, I did. I crouched down, aimed the beam of my flashlight into the narrow gap at the bottom of the roll-up door. And what I saw made the air freeze in my lungs. I swear to you, I saw 2 bare feet standing directly on the other side. No shoes, no socks, just pale, still feet, facing the door as if the person was standing just inches away, waiting. My supervisor told me to stay put and wait for her to arrive. She lived about 20 minutes away. While I waited, standing there in that cold, silent hallway, the tapping finally stopped. But something new started. A dragging sound. It was like someone was pacing back and forth inside the unit, dragging their bare feet slowly along the rough concrete floor. A slow, rhythmic scrape, back and forth. Scrape, back and forth. It went on for almost 10 minutes, the sound grating on my nerves. When my supervisor finally arrived, she had the master keys. Skew. We stood in front of Unit 316, the dragging sound now gone. She looked at me, a little skeptical, but she could see I was genuinely spooked. On the count of 3, she unlocked the unit, and we rolled up the heavy metal door together. It was empty. Completely, utterly empty. There was no furniture, no bags, no boxes, no footprints on the thick layer of dust covering the concrete floor. Nothing. Not a single trace that anyone had ever been inside. I told her I saw feet. I told her about the dragging. She just looked at me with this expression, like she was unsure if I was messing with her or just losing my mind from too many night shifts. But as we started to close the door, she froze. She pointed her own flashlight at the inside of the metal door. There, On the interior side were 3 fresh dents. They were small, shallow, and perfectly spaced exactly where someone would have pressed their knuckles against the metal, or where they might have gently knocked. We filed a report. Of course, nothing ever came of it. How could it? But for weeks after that night, whenever I did my rounds through that hallway, sometimes, just sometimes, I'd hear it again. Tapping, coming from different units. Always 3 knocks, always slow, and never ever when the cameras were pointed at them. When I was younger, I took a job as a night shift CNA at a small regional hospital. I figured the night shift would be a cakewalk. Fewer patients awake, no families visiting, less chaos. But what they don't tell you is that a hospital transforms after dark. The lights seem to hum a little lower, the hallways stretch into infinity, and every little sound echoes like a gunshot. It's a completely different world. One particular night, I was assigned to the East Wing. This was the oldest part of the hospital, with these huge cavernous rooms mostly reserved for long-term patients. It was a quiet night. Only 3 rooms were even occupied. I was at the nurse's station charting, when around 1:15 in the morning, I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps coming down the hall. They weren't shuffling or dragging, but unsteady, like someone was bracing themselves against the wall as they walked. I poked my head out of the station to look, and there he was. A man, tall and thin, wearing one of our standard-issue hospital gowns, who was facing away from me, moving slowly toward room 18. My first thought was that one of my patients was wandering, which is a major full risk. So, I started walking quickly down the hall after him, calling out, "Sir, sir, can I help you get back to your room?" He didn't turn around, just kept walking. But when I reached room 18, he was gone. The door was open, the lights were off, and the room was completely empty. I stepped inside, my heart starting to pound a little. I checked the bathroom, behind the door. Nothing. I spun around and looked back down the long, empty hallway. No one. He had just vanished. Shaken, I went back to the nurse's station and pulled up the security camera footage for that hallway. And this part still gets me. The camera showed me, clear as day, stepping out of the station. It showed me walking down the hall toward room 18. But the man, he wasn't there. There was absolutely nothing on the footage except for me, walking down an empty corridor, talking to thin air. It was like he was never there at all. Tried to rationalize it. I was tired. It was the middle of the night. My mind was playing tricks on me. It had to be. I made some coffee and tried to forget about it. But around 3 a.m., the call bell for room 15 chimed. It was Mrs. Gable, one of my long-term patients, a sweet old lady who rarely needed anything. I went into her room, and the look on her face was pure terror. She was sitting straight up in bed, clutching her blankets. "There's someone walking around," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He keeps standing in my doorway." My stomach dropped. I tried to sound calm. "Can you describe him for me, Mrs. Gable?" Her next words made me want to run right out of that hospital and never look back. "A tall man," she said, her eyes wide, in a gown. "But I can't see his face." My blood ran cold. I promised her I'd check and stepped back out into the hall, scanning every corner, every shadow. Nothing, just the low hum of the hospital machinery. I started walking back to the nurse's station, telling myself I needed to get a grip. But on my way, something happened that solidified the fear in my gut. As I passed room 14, the room directly across the hall from Mrs. Gable's, I glanced in, and I saw him. The room was dark, but a faint light from the window outlined a figure standing just behind the privacy curtain. A silhouette. Tall, thin, it was the same shape, the same man I had seen before. I froze. I literally could not move. My feet felt like they were glued to the floor. I just stood there, staring at the outline of this person who shouldn't be there. And then, the figure slowly, deliberately, stepped backward, melting into the shadows behind the curtain until it was gone. That's when I ran. I sprinted back to the nurse's station, probably looking like I'd seen a ghost, which I guess I had. I grabs 2 other nurses from the main floor, my voice shaking as I tried to explain what I saw. They came with me, and we searched room 14 from top to bottom. It was empty. No one was inside, but the curtain. It was still swaying, ever so slightly, as if someone had just brushed past it. We did a full sweep of the entire wing. We checked every patient. No one was missing. No one was out of bed. There were no unauthorized visitors. There was no explanation. Back at the station, I rewatched the security footage from the last hour, rewinding and replaying it over and over. Again, it only showed me walking to Mrs. Gable's room. Me standing frozen in the hallway, staring into an empty room. No tall man, no shadows, nothing. I worked in that wing for a few more weeks, and every night felt heavier than the last. The air itself seemed thick with dread. On my very last shift in the East Wing, as I was doing my final rounds, I passed Mrs. Gable's room. As I walked by, her hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. I jumped, startled. She pulled me close. "He's still here," she whispered, her eyes locked on mine. "But he doesn't walk anymore. Now he just watches." I quit my job a month later. I couldn't do it anymore. I don't know who or what was haunting that wing of the hospital, but I know it was real. And sometimes, late at night, when it's too quiet, I can still picture that tall, thin figure standing just behind the curtain, watching.